Okay, everybody, welcome to this quick look around the RStudio development environment here. RStudio is the program that we'll be working with during the workshop to run all of our R code for us, to make all of our graphs, do all of any cool data analysis, and anything like that. So I just wanted to take some time to do a quick tour around, show you how to set things up, maybe how you might like them, and then we'll kick off with a whole bunch of fun. So what I'm going to talk about in this video is how to set up your different panes and what they do. Now, if you've just opened R for the first time, your session probably doesn't look anything like mine. So let's have kind of a blank slate here. Yours may look something like this, but your console is probably in a different place down here, and you've probably got a bunch of text in it. So if you'd like to have your RStudio session set up like mine is, and I see no reason why you wouldn't, I feel like it's the best way, but you may not feel that way. You can go ahead and change a whole bunch of options for each of these panes, and we'll talk about quickly what each of them does. So the way I have mine laid out here is with my source file or my code in the top left, my console on the right. This is where I'm going to see what it is, the inputs and the outputs that are being sent to and from R. I have my package and file manager down here on the bottom right. And then I have my environment and my history files down here on the bottom left. If you want to change that up, there's a pane display right in the top bar there. It looks like a window. And you can go right down to pane layout, or in the tools menu, you can choose global options and navigate to pane layout from there. And here you can organize these in any of, 4 main ways, and then you can toggle some options. So again, I have my code or my source file in the top left and my console in the top right. If you wanted to change it so that yours looked the same for the sake of making learning easier, if it helps you, then you could click on that upside down triangle, click console, and then these should automatically rearrange, as mine would if I put the console down here. And this is kind of a nice view because it gives you an idea of what's going on in the actual RStudio interface here. When you're happy with that, you can hit apply. And then as long as we're here, we'll stop in and take a look at some options in terms of the appearance of the editor. You can change pretty much anything about the way RStudio looks and the way your code looks. You can increase or decrease font sizes, the fonts themselves. You can change, of course, the zoom level if you have a funky Windows 10 operating system. And then you can choose different code highlighting motifs or styles or themes. If you're going to be doing this for very long periods of time, a lot of people like to have the light text on darker background. Plus, let's face it, it just looks cooler. I'm going to stick with the default TextMate editor though, because it tends to show up fairly nicely on screens. Again, when you're happy with that, you can go ahead and hit the apply button and it'll bring you back out to the main screen. So if you've done all that, you may or may not have something that looks just like mine. And we can walk through each of these little panes one at a time briefly. So one more time on the top left here, where it says Untitled 1, this is where all of my code files will open, in addition to data that I might want to see in the data viewer. We'll play with that a little bit during the live sessions. Again, on the right, I've got the console here. This is really just going to show me what's going on in R, but it's a handy place to print things out. If you want to see them, you can write, a lot of terminal commands in here, and you do have access to an actual terminal if you're comfortable finding your way around your computer in a terminal, for example. Down on the bottom left is kind of a handy dandy way to keep track of everything that you're making inside of R and all of the data sets that you have, what you've been doing to them. And so the main one here on the left is the environment, and this will show you, again, any objects that you might have made. For example, we previously read in a grass carp data file, and that showed up down here in what is called our global environment or our workspace. You can also display the contents of that workspace with the ls function. You'll notice the similarity between some of the console language and the terminal language there. So anything that we make will show up down here, and many of those objects can be accessed much like a spreadsheet can be accessed in Excel. Again, we'll take a little bit deeper look into that separately. Next to the right there is our history file, and this is just our keeping track of all the code that you've run. And so you see, if you've looked through the workshop code and run any of that, here's a bunch of the workshop code that I had run for other videos. So you can see our data reads there. When we installed the tidyverse, that all got recorded there. And if we want to, we can send that back to the console and rerun it. And you see 1+1 pops up in the console when I have a line highlighted. I can rerun my code. Or maybe it was a really important piece of code that I was testing in the console, and I cleared the console, forgot about it, wasn't being like really responsible, and I maybe want to send it back to my source file. R will pop that right in wherever my cursor was for me, and now I have it back. By default, R is going to save this for each session, and you can turn that on or off just as we did with other stuff in the global options right here in the main general window. So I tend to tell R not to save my history and not to restore the workspace or to save it. Because what happens when you start to do that, specifically with the workspaces, is very often you'll name things the same, even in different analyses, but the steps are the same, right? So you might have an object called model predictions for every analysis. And so what you don't want to do is accidentally have that save to disk, and then when you open R, it gets loaded. So I would recommend you set that to never save the workspace and restore, do not restore the R data in workspace. And as well, I turn off the history save, and that's just a personal preference. You don't need to do that if you don't wish to. There are easy ways to save out a workspace if you want to. Okay, with that, I'm going to leave my file name red for now and move over to the last piece here on our screen is our file and plot and package manager, all of our help files in our viewer window. So the first one there is just showing the files in our working directory. We can open these directly here, right? That was original script that we had made in a previous video. We could open up the first introductory tutorial module there and see all of our code. And we can even access our data files, and we can view those. This isn't very helpful until we've actually read it in, right? This is just showing a comma delimited file. Or we can import them there. I'm actually going to recommend that you read in data files with code as you share your code and collaborate on it, though, because it just makes things a little easier to share if that's already wired in there with a reasonable relative directory. Okay, so I think that's everything in the files menu. Let's check out the plotting window here. Whenever we make graphs in the workshop, those will pop up right here. You can save them out. Our package manager we interacted with in another video here, and this is going to show me what packages I have installed, and I can even click a button here to load them. Again, I would suggest that you actually put this in your code, though, as you write code to share with others. And then there's a fairly expansive help system built into R, but that you can also open up in browser windows. Searching online is really, going to be one of the best ways that you're going to find to deal with some of your early struggles. But here we could find, go search for specific functions. We could say, I don't know, we worked with read CSV in our history file, so we could say, oh, I forgot what that function does, or maybe what the arguments are called. We could run question mark, the name of that function, and it'll pull up a help file for us. It's take a little bit of you getting used to, but once you know how to read them, they're actually super useful. And then finally, you got a viewer window over here that can be used to preview HTML output, markdown, formatted documents. You'll see buffers or progress meters from various add-in programs where R is interfacing with another program for you. So I think at that, we've pretty much covered everything that you might want to play with really early on, and this should get you set up and starting to explore around in RStudio.